When the news finally came, it didn't arrive with chaos. There were no sirens cutting through the morning air, no urgent alerts lighting up phones, no dramatic announcement interrupting regular programming. It arrived quietly. Phil Robertson, the man who spent decades speaking louder than controversy, louder than critics, and louder than modern culture, was suddenly gone. For years, Phil had spoken openly about death, not with fear, not with hesitation. To him, death was not an ending. It was a transition, a doorway into something promised, something eternal. He often told his family exactly how he wanted it handled. "Don't cry when I die," he said. "Dance, sing, celebrate." Those words became familiar, almost casual, something the family heard so often that it felt rehearsed, not urgent. But when the moment finally came, none of them could obey. Because Phil Robertson didn't just leave behind memories. He left behind weight, a fortune layered with faith, a legacy shaped by controversy, a responsibility carefully placed into the hands of the people he loved most, and a final message, written in his own shaky handwriting, that would silence a room and break even the strongest among them. This is not just the story of a television personality. This is the story of a man forged by hunger, hardened by failure, redeemed by faith, and remembered not for what he earned, but for what he demanded from those who came after him. A boy raised by hunger and mud. Phil Robertson was born in 1946 in rural Louisiana, into a world where survival came before ambition and comfort was never assumed. Food did not come from stores. It came from the swamp, from the woods, from whatever could be hunted, trapped, or fished that day. If the hunt failed, dinner failed. Hunger was not a metaphor. It was a schedule. There were no safety nets, no backup plans, no promises of tomorrow. That environment stripped away illusion early. Phil learned that nature did not care about effort, only outcome. Excuses meant nothing. Weakness had consequences. Those lessons did not fade with age. Even decades later, after wealth and fame arrived, Phil never fully trusted comfort. He stored supplies. He fixed things himself. He lived as if tomorrow could take everything away, because once, it almost always could. Scarcity left a permanent imprint. Money felt temporary. Skill felt permanent. Discipline felt essential. The swamp also taught him silence. Long hours alone sharpened patience and observation. Phil learned how to wait, how to watch, and when to act. These were not just hunting skills, they became life skills. He later told his children that struggle was not punishment. It was training. That belief didn't make him gentle. It made him prepared. Without this childhood, the hunger, the mud, the isolation, there is no Duck Commander. There is no Duck Dynasty. There is no Phil Robertson as the world would come to know him. Everything began here. The quarterback who chose the swamp. Phil Robertson was not only tough, he was gifted. His athletic ability earned him a football scholarship to Louisiana Tech University. By the mid-1960s, he was the starting quarterback. Coaches believed he had real potential. A future in professional football was not unrealistic. Behind him on the depth chart sat a young backup quarterback named Terry Bradshaw. For most young men, this would have been the moment to chase everything they had been promised: fame, money, escape from poverty. Phil walked away. Not because he failed, not because he was pushed out, but because football interfered with duck season. "I'd rather hunt ducks than have large, violent men stomp me into the dirt," he later said. To outsiders, it sounded absurd. To Phil, it was clarity. Football demanded obedience to systems, schedules, coaches, expectations. Hunting rewarded patience, independence, and self-reliance. One offered applause. The other offered freedom. Phil believed opportunity was common. Freedom was rare. That decision confused nearly everyone around him. It would be retold for decades, often as a joke. But it revealed something critical. Phil Robertson would never allow institutions, whether sports, media, or culture, to own him. That instinct never left. every time he later rejected public pressure, softened language, or cultural expectations. He was making the same decision he made at Louisiana Tech. The stadium was loud. The swamp made sense. Marriage, alcohol, and the years of failure. While Phil rejected fame, his personal life quietly unraveled. He married Kay when she was just 17 years old, already pregnant with their first child. They were young, poor, and unprepared for the weight that arrived too early. Responsibility came before maturity. As Phil struggled with identity, alcohol became his escape. Drinking dulled the uncertainty. It quieted the pressure, temporarily. The early years of their marriage were unstable. Phil drank heavily. He was unpredictable. He disappeared for days at a time. Kay was left to hold the household together through fear, prayer, and endurance. These were the years Duck Dynasty never showed. The years of anger, the years of absence, the years Phil himself would later describe as his darkest. The damage did not disappear overnight. Even after his transformation, trust had to be rebuilt slowly. Phil never denied these failures. He spoke of them openly, often describing himself not as a hero, but as a warning. Kay later said the hardest part was not the anger. It was the uncertainty, never knowing who Phil would be when he came home. That uncertainty left scars, and those scars shaped everything that came next. The moment that saved everything. The turning point did not arrive with applause. It arrived quietly. Phil walked into a small church in West Monroe, restless, defensive, and angry. He walked out, changed. His conversion to Christianity was not gradual. It was immediate and absolute. There was no half-commitment, no negotiation. From that moment forward, Phil rebuilt what he had nearly destroyed. He apologized to Kay. He recommitted to his children. He abandoned alcohol. He replaced chaos with discipline. Faith did not soften Phil Robertson. It sharpened him. Christianity became his framework for truth. Scripture guided his speech, his parenting, his business decisions, and his expectations of others. He believed truth did not adapt to culture. Culture was meant to submit to truth. That belief would later place him at the center of national controversy. But Phil accepted that cost early. From that day forward, he lived as if judgment came from God alone. Duck Commander, a business built on poverty. In 1972, Phil turned survival into purpose. Duck Commander began inside his home. Hand-carved duck calls, one order at a time. Money was scarce. Kay stretched meals. Children watched sacrifice before success. There were years when survival still depended on the swamp, but the product worked. Hunters trusted Phil because he lived the life he sold. Duck Commander grew slowly, not through marketing, but through authenticity. Even as success arrived, Phil lived as if it hadn't. He believed wealth dulled instinct. Comfort worried him more than poverty ever had. That mindset shaped everything, including how he would later structure his will. Phil did not want his children comfortable. He wanted them capable. Television fame, power, and the cost of being seen. As Duck Dynasty grew, it stopped being just a television show and became a cultural mirror. Viewers didn't tune in only for duck calls or family banter. They tuned in to hear something that felt increasingly rare. Certainty. Phil Robertson spoke as if doubt didn't exist. In a culture that prized nuance and apology, he offered conviction and refusal. For some, it was refreshing. For others, it was dangerous. Ratings soared. Merchandise sold out. The Robertson family became household names. But fame brought pressure. Pressure Phil never acknowledged publicly, but clearly understood. Networks wanted polish. Advertisers wanted safety. Producers wanted predictability. Phil wanted none of it. He refused media training. He rejected softened language. He didn't study audience demographics or cultural trends. He spoke the same way in front of millions that he spoke at his own kitchen table. That consistency made Duck Dynasty powerful and unstable. Phil was no longer just a man from the swamp. He was a symbol, and symbols invite conflict, controversy, backlash, and a man who would not move. In 2013, the tension finally erupted. Comments Phil made during a magazine interview ignited immediate backlash. Headlines exploded. Advertisers pulled support. The network suspended him. Civil rights groups demanded apologies. The situation escalated quickly. The story dominated news cycles. Social media turned into a battlefield. Many expected Phil to step back, to clarify, to soften, to apologize. He refused. Phil stated clearly that his beliefs came from Scripture and were not subject to public revision. To him, truth wasn't negotiated through opinion polls. Supporters rallied in massive numbers. Merchandise sales surged. Hashtags defending him trended. Critics intensified their condemnation. The controversy didn't just affect Phil. It affected his family. His children faced scrutiny. His wife faced judgment. The pressure was relentless, but Phil remained unmoved. Within weeks, the network reinstated him. He had made something unmistakably clear. He was willing to lose everything: fame, fortune, platform, rather than abandon conviction. That moment cemented his legacy as both admired and divisive. Faith and the expanding target. After the controversy, Phil's role shifted. He was no longer just a reality TV personality. He became a political and cultural figure. He openly endorsed conservative candidates. He spoke at rallies. He framed politics through faith. To supporters, he represented resistance to cultural change. To critics, he represented everything they opposed. Phil didn't separate faith from politics. He believed values belonged everywhere, especially where power existed. This stance further polarized audiences. Ratings eventually declined. Duck Dynasty ended in 2017 after 11 seasons. But Phil didn't retreat. He transitioned. Life after Duck Dynasty. Quiet years with loud meaning. Without cameras following his every move, Phil settled into a routine. Podcasts replaced television. Conversations replaced production schedules. Early mornings returned. Scripture readings became central again. This phase of life was quieter, but not passive. Phil spoke often about death, not with sadness, but with certainty. He believed preparation mattered more than avoidance. These conversations were not abstract. They were intentional. He spoke as if time mattered now, because it did. Those close to him later said these years were some of the most meaningful. Phil wasn't chasing relevance. He was securing meaning. He wasn't building success anymore. He was preparing an inheritance. The diagnosis that changed everything. In December 2024, the family publicly revealed what they had been facing privately. Phil Robertson had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. At first, the symptoms were subtle: misplaced objects, repeated questions, long pauses mid-sentence, moments of confusion that could be brushed aside. But the disease progressed aggressively. Memory slipped faster than expected. Physical strength weakened. Conversations became fragmented. Stories went unfinished. By early 2025, the family could no longer hide the truth. On a podcast episode, his son spoke words that carried enormous weight. "He's not good. We're making him comfortable." Those words told the world what the family had already accepted. The man who had built an empire with certainty was losing control, piece by piece, watching a giant fade. For a man defined by independence, Alzheimer's was cruel. Phil struggled with days of the week. Familiar routines required help. Speaking for long periods became exhausting. Silence replaced certainty. Yet something remained intact: his demeanor. He is calm, his faith. Family members described moments where Phil seemed distant, and moments where he was unmistakably present, listening quietly, observing, calm in ways that surprised them. It was as if the disease could steal memory, but not foundation. That realization brought both comfort and grief. Preparation before goodbye. Long before his condition worsened, Phil had prepared. He spoke openly about death. He gave verbal instructions. He repeated his wishes so often they became familiar. "Don't cry," he told them. "Celebrate." But Phil also prepared practically. He wrote letters, not typed, not dictated, handwritten. Each letter was personal, uneven handwriting, shaky ink, final thoughts written while clarity still allowed. These were not legal explanations. They were guidance. In the early hours of May 25, 2025, Phil Robertson passed away at home. He was surrounded by family. There were no machines, no panic, no spectacle, just quiet. He was 79 years old. The announcement that followed was simple: grief mixed with gratitude. The family emphasized faith, not loss. Phil had gone, they said, to be with the Lord. A funeral without cameras. The funeral was private. No reporters, no cameras, no politicians. Just family, close friends, and silence heavy with shared history. There were prayers, scripture readings, long pauses that said more than words. Phil had asked them not to cry. Most couldn't help it. The will that broke the room. The day after the funeral, the family gathered in a lawyer's office. What they expected was a standard reading of assets. What they received was something far heavier. Phil had prepared handwritten letters for each family member. Each envelope contained a portion of the estate and a message explaining why. His net worth, estimated between $10 and $15 million, came from decades of work. Duck Commander, Duck Dynasty, books, licensing, and speaking. But the money wasn't the shock. The meaning was who received what and why. His wife received the family estate, the home built from nothing. One son received religious writings, a lifetime of study. Others received shares of Duck Commander, along with responsibility. One daughter received land and an apology for lost years. And one son received control of the business and a single message: protect the faith, protect the legacy. That was when the tears came. Not because of what they gained, but because of what they were being trusted with. Understanding the man behind the fortune. To understand why the will carried such weight, the family looked back. Phil's life was not defined by money. It was defined by struggle, failure, discipline, and redemption. The fortune was built slowly, across decades of refusal to compromise. The letters were not instructions for comfort. They were warnings, a legacy that demands action. Phil Robertson did not want to be remembered as a celebrity. He wanted to be remembered as faithful. His fortune will fade. His fame will age. But the responsibility he left behind remains active. Every decision his family makes now carries expectation. That is the legacy. Phil Robertson's death marked the end of a generation. A man shaped by hardship, defined by conviction, redeemed by faith. His era may be gone, but his legacy remains. What part of Phil Robertson's story impacted you the most? Tell us below, and subscribe for more stories that shaped our culture forever.